So today, the journey. So now the journey is from Mount Sinai to go to Kadesh Barnea. And you'll see it sometimes just referred to as Kadesh. That's the plan, is to go that way. Now, even though I took this quote from Irving Jensen's book, and I thought it was interesting how he points this out, but for their trip would have took only 11 days. From there, be right there, right in from there, okay? But it didn't work that way, did it? 11 days didn't work for them. Because we're going to see that as we go through, and he talks about the 3 stages of the trip here. As you see, and I'm looking at the back screen, I'm not able to see this. So the Kadesh, as you see, to Kadesh, that's the first stage of that. The next one is from the desert wandering, from Kadesh, and then the desert wandering, and then they come back to Kadesh again before they go to Moab, before they go into the land. So it's kind of like 3 stages here he points out. And here's the next slide, talks about that a little bit differently. So the first stage is really unbelief. Their unbelief that you deal with. Because of their unbelief leads to the next situation, which is what? 40 years wandering because of their unbelief. Because their unbelief that they would not go into the promised land. We're going to talk about that this morning as we get through this lesson this morning. Because of that, they're going to be wandering around in the desert because of that situation. And as you see here, they were reaping the divine chastening in the desert because of their unbelief. The third situation is this third stage is the new generation. And what is that talking about? Anybody have any ideas? Why is there a new generation?
All the old people that murmured and complained, God will not let them go into the promised land.
That's right.
After they pass, then the new generation, the young people.
And that's right. That'll be a new generation that Moses has to lead up to the promised land. He doesn't get to go into the promised land, of course, but he leads them up to that point. So that's what this opening part about the journey, keeping that in mind here for you. Here's the tables I handed out to you last week. There's copies of here, of course. There's 4 pages of this. But I want to touch on, I barely touched on it last week at the very conclusion of this, but I think it's good to know because it kind of guides you along through this. This is the big picture. The slide 1 is the big picture of all of this together. Genesis and Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Kind of like the big picture of all of this together. So what I did, I took it for the next slide here, slide 2, to break it down for you. Kind of zoom in on where we're at here and kind of give you, I'm trying to show you the relationship of these books. I don't know about you, but if you ever sat down and you say, okay, I know there's 5 books that Moses wrote, I understand that, but to see how they relate together and when they came about and what did they touch on, okay? And to see this, I think, helps understand something about them as well. But as you see in this part here, I'm going to have to look at my copy here for you. I got my copy right here. In slide 2, as it says there, the top right corner has where it says slide. I don't know if you see slide 2 up there. So looking at that, you'll see where it does the journey to Mount Sinai, where they journey to Mount Sinai. And when they get to Mount Sinai, what do they do there? They're there for 11 months. And so what do they do there for 11 months? What's the big scheme of what happened? Okay. All right, that's one event, and that's a key event that happened. So what is the whole thing for 11 months being there? What's going on for that 11 months? Pardon? They're getting the law. They're getting the law. The Lord is laying out the law for them. Okay, He's giving that to Moses. And Moses writing that down, of course. As you see, the book of Leviticus is written, of course, for a lot of instructions. There are a lot of laws involved in that, instructions there. But while they're there, of course, they do sin because while Moses is up there, of course, they have, the calf is made and they worship the calf and all that. And Moses goes down, it breaks the tablets and all that. So all that took place. But while they're there, they're getting the law presented to them. And also there's something else that's happening there for them. Anything else? The priest, the establishment of the priesthood is being established for them. And something else is being established? The tabernacle, which is very, very instrumental, very central to them, is having the tabernacle and having the priesthood for them, because they didn't have this earlier. Remember, they've been in Egypt as slaves. They didn't have any of this. Now they're having this all established. The establishment of the tabernacle was what the Lord showed Moses how it's to be done. And the details was given to Moses, what it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to be laid out. Very much of the details were given to this and the priesthood. So keep that in mind as well. So there's some key things that happen there at Mount Sinai. So they're there about 11 months and so many days, and now they get up and they have to start moving. So with this movement, and you'll see this here, you'll see it in this part of the slide here later on, but we'll talk about that. Let me hold up on that part. So taking this next slide here, the next slide here is slide, I think, 3 here for it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, slide 3, I try to put a red circle around that area there. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about that section first, and then we're going to talk about the next section beside it. Let me turn around, look this way to it. We're going to talk about this section first. I guess you can see that. And then we're going to talk about here, the spies going into the land and the results of that, what happens because of that, them going into the land. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning for you. So the first part here, the short trip. Let me move this out of my way. You're of no value to me. All right, so the first part of this, move this out of my way too, is the short trip. Because you got the long trip, it's going to be 40 year long, or approximately 40 years long of the trip, of course. So the short trip is 11 days. But in that, to think about, and that's what I put up here to think about, it occurred, the events that occurred here showed the people's lack of faith. Really it does. It just shows their lack of faith. The Lord has taken care of them. They have left Egypt and brought through the Red Sea and all of that they've gone through. And now they've been at Mount Sinai and the Lord's taking care of them there. And they still complain. Okay, you're going to see that this complaining. That's one big issue we're going to talk about this morning as well. But while they're there, you're going to speak about their unbelief. And you're thinking, now let me ask you this. If you had been one of them, and if you had been there, had gone through the Red Sea and gone to Mount Sinai and been sitting in the camp, and you're out there camped out waiting for Moses. Moses comes up and down the mountain. You know, those times he comes and he brings information from the Lord about the rules and the law and all that he gives them, 10 commandments and all that kind of stuff he gives. How would you respond? Don't you think you'd probably be just like them? Get impatient, be impatient. We can look back and say, oh, no, I wouldn't be like that. It wouldn't be me. No, don't we? We have that. Yes, Terry?
I think we all want the blessings and the benefits of the kingdom. But when it comes down to giving your allegiance to the king, I think sometimes people can grow weary of their service to the king.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you forget what you forget what God had done for you in that time. And I think sometimes you lose the wonder of your God. And even today we can lose the wonder of our salvation if we allow it. And I think that also that leads to a place of apathy and complacency and complaining and
Mm-hmm. But it does happen it happens to us. As much as we think we might be spiritual and so super spiritual people sometimes, we do have a tendency sometimes forget what the Lord has done for us. And we do that. So we would do probably what they just did. We have a tendency to look back, oh, you guys messed up. I wouldn't have done it that way. Yeah, we look backwards at that. But if you were in their situation and going what they had gone through, you've probably been just like the rest of them as well, doing that. Right.
And I would never lose the wonder of my salvation, but you just can't say that. You have to constantly be on your guard and think, yes, I could.
Right. And you have to be on your guard. And they should have been on their guard all the time about that, but they were not doing so. As we go through this, you'll see more about this. But and another thing to think about here is also God called, as I put here, to order and to judgment. God's a God of order. Let everything be done decently and in order, he says in the New Testament. Let everything be done decently and in order. And the Lord always has order to things. And he has an order for them. Fritz, you brought out before, we talked about these four, thinking moving 2 to 3 million people from out of Egypt, how do they move? And how do they move not go that way and scatter to follow the leader? To follow that leader was Moses and Aaron, to be those leaders, trying to follow them. And the Lord has laid out an order for them. an order that you're going to see here. We're going to talk about here in a second. I'll show you that. Let me go to the order here. So here's the little outline for today's lesson I've laid out here. The orderly fashion, kvetching, I don't know if y'all know what that is, and then judgment and spying the land. And this is what I broke it out to be this morning. We're going to touch on and what these are, okay? I know I'm going by these chapters here, and you think, oh, John, we're never going to make it if you're going to go through every chapter in the book. But this is not my plan. I think you need to see this part to get an establishment of where we're going, okay? Okay? So the orderly fashion. In Numbers chapter 2, and you're going to go to chapter 10 here if you want to turn to Numbers chapter 10. But Numbers chapter 2, the Lord laid out about how when the tabernacle was built and how the priest and how the order of the camp was to be. This is a layout of the order of the camp. Let me turn towards this layout for you. So here's the tabernacle, and here's how it's to be laid out with Korah, his group, Gershon and Merari, and Moses and Aaron here. And here's at the beginning of the tabernacle, the entrance of the tabernacle. And in that layout was to be these tribes here, okay? You can call it the camp of Judah because camp was the leader, the standard, okay? And each one of these. So you had over here, you had the camp of, the standard was I think it was Reuben here is the lead. And over here you had Ephraim's the lead. And over here you have Dan as the lead. But that's how they had to be, when they set up camp, that's how they had to set their camp up. And you see here, and I'm going to point out to you, the compass, northeast, west, and south, how it's supposed to be laid out. So when the Lord stopped the camp, they had to set up in this direction. The Lord wanted order in everything. The order, how they to lay out, how they to do their camps, to set their camps up and all this for them. And when they get ready to move in chapter 10, if you look in chapter 10, Numbers, when they got ready to move in chapter 10 of Numbers, going down here and look down in verse 11. And it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year that the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle of the testimony. That was the indication to do what? Start packing it up. We're moving. And the children of Israel took their journeys out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And they first took their journey according to the commandment of the Lord by the hand of Moses. In the first place went the standard of the camp of the children of Judah, according to their armies. Over his host was Nahshon and the son of Abinadab, and goes on from there. It talks about each one of these groups here and who's the leader of that group. Now you notice what it says here. He said here, the first place went the standard of the camp of the children of Judah, according to their what? Armies. Because they had numbered all the men from 20 years on and up who are capable of fighting. And that's how they numbered them. And that's how these numbers come about. The book of Numbers deals with numbers. There's two census that takes place. The census that takes place earlier in the book and at the end of the book, there's another census that takes place of numbers, of counting up the people. But in this counting up, you had to be 20 years older up of the men involved. So you dear ladies didn't have to worry about that, did you? The men had to do all that dirty work, right? They had to do all the fighting. Okay? Nowadays, people say, well, we want women's equal rights, and we're going to go and do the same thing the men do. Yeah, that ain't how it worked back then. God chose those men who were 20 years on and up to be the ones who go on to fight. So that's how it was chosen. But in this chapter here, it goes through, and I'm not going to read every part of this, but that was the order that God had laid out for them. When they got up to move, and that's what I wanted you to see here, I put this here for you, is this book in Numbers lays out, this group, then what happens here. So go to we're in chapter 10, but go down verse 17. And the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari set forward bearing the tabernacle. So that's just their order. It talks about the group of these moving, and then right behind them, here comes the tabernacle moves. And then after that, another group here, as you see here. Let me point back to here, see it back here. So then this group here, Reuben is the lead, and Gad and Simeon, these tribes here together, they get up and they're to move. They're to move together as well. So the next event takes place, if you see here, is chapter 10, verse 21, and the Kohathites set forward bearing the sanctuary, and the other did set up the tabernacle against they came. Why do you think this order's like this? I'm going to move on from this real quickly here, but why do you think this order's like this? Put them little thinking caps on. Okay, good point, very good point. They had to have an order because when they're moving in this orderly fashion, when they get to their destination, they got to set up again, don't they? So how do they set up? They put the ark in position. The tabernacle has to go up. And then the next thing are the Kohathites come and they bring all the other things, the holy things that go inside that tabernacle. So it was an order to this. There's no chaos involved in this. You know what I'm saying? You ever gone camping with a bunch of guys? Sometimes a little bit of chaos. Oh, who's getting the cooking stuff up? Oh, well, the cooking stuff. Oh, the tents are up over here. Where are the tents? Oh, over here. I've been camping with a bunch of guys. You know, we've done this before. We see it. And you think we got it down pat sometimes. It doesn't feel like it always is sometimes. But we did it. But when they go, they got this order to it. And God has order to everything. He has this order for them to move. When they get to their destinations, they know immediately when this is where the cloud sits at, this is where the ark goes. And they know to put the tabernacle around it. And and they know which is east and north and west and south. So the tribes know, they start getting in their positions. They know where they have to go. Instead of this tribe, oh, you're in my place. No, this is my place. There's order to this whole thing. I'm trying to emphasize this, the order that the Lord has. As much as people much as people gripe and complain about, I want to do it my way, God says, this is the way it's to be done. What if one of the tribes says, no, I don't want to be, we don't want a tribe over here. Let me back it up. We don't, say one of the tribes says, hey, Issachar says, no, I don't like being beside Judah. I just don't like beside his tribe. I don't like being beside them. I want to be on the other side. They didn't have that choice. God says, this is the way it's going to be. And this is how they had to do it. So there is order to this. So let's move on. So orderly fashion, chapter 10. Chapter 11, one of the most interesting chapters, I think. If you hopefully in chapter 11 there. And when the people complained, what happened? Chapter 11, verse 1, it said what? It displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. Now, if you're in that camp and you're one of those sitting out there on the outside line and outliners there, and you were complaining and griping, it didn't look good. It was burning. It says here, the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched, and he called the name of the place Tab-eriah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Now, that's what that word means. It means burning, that name that's there. Irving in his book said he didn't think people were burnt, but their possessions were burnt up around them at that point. But what triggered this? Murmuring, complaining. Now, I'm not going to ask any show of hands in this room. Has anybody complained this past week? Murmured about anything. The church is not doing this. They're not, they don't do this. The pastor's not doing this. Deacons aren't doing this. No. None of y'all done that, right? Don't put your hands up. Don't put your hands up. But God doesn't like murmuring, complaining. Okay? And this word that you see up here, what's interesting, I got a magazine called Israel My Glory. This happened, I just got the issue the other week. And this is the article in there. And I'm quoting from that. And it's called kavich, which means habitual complainer. And he said in there, and I thought it was interesting, that's why I bring it out to you, the ancient Israelites set the gold standard for complaining. You think about it. When God is blessing them and taking care of them, what do? Complain. Now, I don't know about you, those who've been parents and are still parents and got children, and you've got little children, I don't know, you got older, y'all are on Medicare, that's right, I forgot. So you got, so whatever your age of your children, when they gripe and complain, how do you feel about it? Oh, that's all right, that's fine. Are you? No, it doesn't. It's aggravating, isn't it? It bothers you. When these people complain, and the Lord, in verse 11, chapter 11, verse 1, and when the people complained, it displeased the Lord. The Lord wasn't happy to hear that. And the Lord put judgment on them for that. But I know none of y'all complain, right? So that's right. We're okay on that. I put this table together. You should have a copy of this table. I laid it out here for you. And I put this together to show some of the complaining that took place. This is not the first time they complained. When was the first time we got recording of they complaining? Remember? At where? When they got to the Red Sea and the enemy's coming in and closing in on them, they said, oh, we're going to die here. First thing. And what did the Lord do about it? He opened the Red Sea up for them. He made provisions for them. And the Lord has been very gracious in so many ways in taking care of them and blessing them and helping them out. But there's a list here. I got a list of 11 I think I put in my list. But I could be differently, but I tried to go through there. And let me get a copy of that myself. TV Land says, where did John go? All right, so if you got this table here, you'll see all these things that took in place. I listed down from Exodus all the way through Numbers. And I want you to see some of these things. They cried out. They murmured against Moses. They murmured against Moses and Aaron. They just complained. They wept again. They murmured. They rose up before Moses. These things against their leadership, right? But what's interesting, and then we'll talk about that later. I guess we can get to that later. But no. They chode with Moses. People spake against God and against Moses. That's in chapter 21, Numbers 21. They spoke against God and Moses. What is this thing about murmuring? Two issues, I think, are involved in this. And I like how Dr. Irving said in his book, Irving Jensen's book. He says there's two key things to this thing. Anybody have any ideas what it could be? What is the basis of murmuring? What is it? Selfishness. Okay. 1 point. It sounds good. Pardon? Wrong attitudes of the heart. Okay, that sounds good. Failure to focus on the Lord. Okay. Unbelief is one of those key things. Isn't it? Unbelief. What's the other thing? Ungrateful. And that's the other thing he points out. Not so much grief, but it's ungrateful, I think. Greed. Oh, greed, yeah. But the key is, and I think his point is unbelief and ungrateful. Lord, you have blessed us with this. You have blessed my family. You've taken care of us. You've done all these things for us. But I'm going to go here and complain about because you haven't done more. You haven't done some things I think you should be doing. Or you've done all these things for us, Lord, but can you help us out here? I don't know if you can do this, Lord. I question your ability to be able to help me. So in unbelief and ingratitude, we should give thanks to Lord when? Only when he does things for us? Always. Giving thanks always to him. There's a lot of things we probably think we know everything, but we don't. We think, we know everything about what's going on in our life, but we don't know some of the things that go in the background that the Lord is protecting us from. How he takes care of us we don't know about. Oh, we may see situations come up. Oh, the Lord saved me from an accident. But how about other accidents that could have happened, but he protected you from that? And I heard what you said about your trip. I thought was interesting. The Clappers trip, how the Lord protected them there. But there's times the Lord does stuff for us. We don't know all that goes on, but we need to thank him for his grace and his mercy in our lives each and every day. And trusting him. Isn't part of our walk is to do, and the key about our walk is belief by faith. We walk by faith. So when situations come up, we need to talk to him about it. And not complain, but talk to him about it. There's nothing wrong about talking to the Lord about this. I don't know what to do, Lord, but I'm laying it at your feet and asking you for your help for whatever the situation might be. So that's the two key things I think really are to the point. Unbelief and ingratitude. Yes, Terry.
I think sometimes if we're not, our dependence on God is supposed to be total. And if it's not, even in the slightest something that you think may not be very important, but if you're not giving total dependence to God, then you're independent.
Yeah.
Even for a split second, being independent can cause so many problems.
Right.
My own life. It can cause you to be, if you're not living totally dependent and you're not relying on him, having that faith, then that's going to make room for all sorts of other emotions, anger, sadness, unhappiness.
Right.
And then when you have that frame of mind, you do not make godly choices.
That's true. You got to realize we got to trust him for everything. If you work, you say, well, I work. I made money. I got food on the table. But who gave you the breath to work? Who gave you the strength to get up? Who gave you the job to do the work, to make the money? It's by the hand of the Lord that you have anything. It's given by him. No matter what, no matter how much you think, how smart you are, how good you are, how great your health might be, but it's by the hand of the Lord that you have anything. And it's true. The next thing is judgment. Chapter 12. So go to chapter 12. I could have gone through all some of these other things here through chapter 11, but the complaining here. Let's see where I'm at. Let's see. Now let's back up in chapter 11. I do want to touch on this. Chapter 11, verse 10. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. As a leader, he's hearing these complaints. He's hearing this griping, complaining going on in chapter 11, verse 10. Down in verse 11, and the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? He's talking to the Lord. Thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them? And thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child into the land which the Lord sweareth unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me. Isn't it kind of like, I'm just discouraged, Lord. This is the way it's going to be. It's discouraging. I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. And the Lord said to Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, and that they may stand there with thee. This is where, and I want to point this out, this is where Moses was asking for help. After all, can you imagine a leader of people that griped and complained, and he just keeps hearing this? He says, I need help. Lord, I just can't, these are not my children. They didn't come from me, but they're the ones you gave me to lead, and I'm to treat them like my children. But it's just too much. And he's asking for help from the Lord. The Lord does help him, and he gives him 70 leaders are come and brought forward to help with the leadership of this. Even though there's Moses and Aaron working together at this, but there's other elders that are help to this. But the Lord also does provide for them. He does give them, as you see in verse, we're going to go down to verse 31. And there went forth a wind from the Lord and brought quails from the sea and let them fly off the camp, fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and it was it were on a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face there. That's a lot of quail showing up. All you quail hunters, man, you ought to have had a ball here and all this. All these quails you got. And the people stood up all that day, and all that night, and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. And he that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves and round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaroth, because there they buried the people that lusted. There was people that lusted for this. They complained, they griped, and they got it, but it cost them, some of them.
So it wasn't a blessing, it was a judgment.
Right. So moving on to chapter 12. And of course, chapter 12 is talking about judgment here. As you see here, it's talking about the judgment here. as I got here, as seen with the complaining of the people, the Lord has at times applied judgment on them. And here you got two people who are very instrumental in Moses' life, his brother and his sister. They're older than him, and they complain because he takes on another wife. Because you see here in chapter 12, verse 1, and Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, and come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they came out. And the short of this judgment is what's going to happen to Miriam. That she was going to have leprosy. Look down here in verse 6. Well, verse 5. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not, if my servant is not so, who is faithful in all my house? With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in the dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. The Lord points out that he is upset with them because how they spoke against his man. The one he chose was Moses. That's who he chose. And as you go down and see verse 11, and Aaron said to Moses, alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon me, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead of whom the flesh is half consumed when he cometh out of the mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. This is where she got the leprosy. The Lord said she was going to have the leprosy, but she was going to have it for 7 days and had to be outside the camp. And the camp could not move until she came back in. But he laid it upon her, his judgment. I think it's important to think about this sometimes. In leadership, even in the church, we start griping, complaining about our pastor or somebody. Be prepared. Because who is the leader? The pastor is the leader. You should be praying for him, whatever, encouraging him and all that. You know, that's what we should be doing, praying and encouraging our pastor. The Lord didn't look kindly on this about complaining against Moses. That's the one he chose for that position to lead these people. And they complained about that. Let me move on. So the last part is spying the land. So hopefully I can get through this real quickly for you. This is probably the most part I should have been at anyways. So spying the land. So in spying the land, chapter 13 reveals, let me turn around here, I can see it better. And chapter 13 reveals very clearly to what extent the destiny of the nation was steered by the persuasive voices of some of its leaders. When they got here, they sent, how many went into the land to check it out? 12 spies were selected from the 12 tribes were selected. Now, God had already told Moses, but when the people got there, they said, well, let's send somebody in. Let's go send somebody and check it out. So the Lord agreed to allow that to take place, to allow to send them in there. So he allowed them to do this. But that's on the next slide. I know I'm kind of jumping a little bit ahead. So how important for God's leader to lead right? It's very important how the leaders lead right. Because you're going to see here, and this is the kind of overview of that, is how when these spies go in and come back out, what they say. Chapter 14 shows to what extent that destiny was determined by the choice of the people. The choice of the people. What decisions did they make that made a difference? So let's look at this. Let's move on. So after Moses commanded Israel to enter the land, the people wanted to send the spies in. So the Lord agreed to that. The Lord allowed that to take place. And the Lord told him, choose 12 guys, leaders of your people, and to go into that land. So they go in that land, and they're there for 40 days. Aren't they glad it was only 40 days and not 60 days or, longer days than that? But there was only 40 days over there because of the results. So if you look in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19, I didn't Deuteronomy chapter 1 and 19 over here goes along with this. So you have to see chapter 1. Yeah, it is 19. And when we departed from Horeb, we went through all the great and terrible wilderness which you saw by the way of the mountain of Amorites, as the Lord our God commanded us. And we came to Kadesh Barnea, and I said unto you, ye are come into the mountain of the Amorites, which the Lord our God hath give unto you. Behold, the Lord thy God hath set the land before thee. Go up and possess it, as the Lord God of thy fathers hath said unto thee. Fear not, neither be discouraged. And you came near unto me, every one of you, and said, we will send men before us, and that they shall search us out the land, and bring us word again by that way which we must go, and to what cities we shall come. And the saying pleased me well, and I took 12 men of you, one of a tribe. And he goes on and talks about that. So each of the tribes. So we know there's 12 spies that go in, and of those 12 spies, they come back. They come back after 40 days. They come back, and the majority, which is 10 of them, say what? We can't go in there. There's great big walled cities. There's giants in the land. We look like little tiny grasshoppers. It's impossible for us to do this. There's no way we should even try to look at this. These base their decisions on what? What they saw. What they were thinking, what they saw. Not relying on what? What did God say? Do you think God, I think you messed up on this one. Are you sure? Have you looked over in that land? Have you looked over in there and saw what's over there, Lord? I mean, it's about what they're asking, telling the Lord. We can't do this. The Lord didn't check the land out before we got here. That's basically what you're saying. The Lord said, you can go in there and take that land. But the 10 of them, majority, made what? A wrong decision. And led the people in a wrong decision. But in the meantime, Joshua and Caleb are doing a stand and say, hey, we can do this. We can go in there. The land, they're trying to appeal to the people. Don't turn your back on the Lord on this thing. Don't do that. And they're telling them these 3 points here. The land is exceedingly good. Jehovah favors it. If Jehovah favors it, we will go into the land. And they already know that. Because the Lord said what? The Lord says, go into the land. And also, he will favor us. We will do not rebel against him. Pointing all that out. So if you turn to Numbers chapter 14 and verse 6. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them, and that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. But all the congregation said what? Y'all are right. That ain't what they said, is it? All the congregation did what? Bade, stoned them with stone. They were getting ready to stone them. They did not want to hear that. They didn't want to hear anything about this. They said, we're not doing that. 10 against 2, the majority wins. That's how it worked, right? We voted, that's how it worked. There's no vote here. Decisions were made. And the people made a wrong decision about this, to do that, to still rebel against what? Against what the Lord had said to do. So it's very important to know that. Now the Lord told Moses and Aaron what judgment was to take place. What judgment was to take place? I need to turn back around here. Oh, I ran out of time. Everyone, the original of the census, 20 years old and upward, and I think somebody mentioned that earlier, who murmured against Jehovah would die in the wilderness in the course of the 40 years, each year representing a day the spies were reconnaissing. Jacob, of course, Caleb and Joshua, as well as the children of the people, because of the people complained about what? When they heard about this, what did they complain? Our children, our wives, they're all going to die if we go in that land. And who are the ones who lived? The children lived. The Lord took care of them for 40 years through the wilderness. Took care of them. Last slide. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. As an unmistakable evidence that God's word of judgment would be literally fulfilled, the spies, except Joshua and Caleb, all died from a plague. And they buried them. They died. Isn't it amazing? Can you imagine those guys, those 10 guys who complained, who said, hey, we can't go in? They died. The people were not left with a question as to how to interpret the Lord's words of judgment. And shortly after this, I have to zip it up real quick. They tried, oh, we made a mistake. The people said, oh, we made a mistake. We didn't mean that, Lord. We're going to try to go in ourselves. And they tried to go in, and they couldn't go in. They were driven back by the Amalekites, another tribe, another group of people. The key thing is unbelief was taking place here. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. That's what Hebrews chapter 11, I think. Without faith, it's impossible to please him.